Good evening, and welcome to those who watch below. This is it, it's the big night, Halloween itself, where the veil thins, and the spirits of those departed wander the earth. Tonight, we have 4 more truly creepy tales, including creepypastas and true-to-life stories. I just want to take this opportunity to thank every single narrator that has helped me realise my crazy idea over the past 5 days. I really hope you enjoyed listening, and with that, let's begin. The Creep Without a Face. This is an experience from 2 years ago while I was a college student. I used to rent an apartment at a complex near the uni. Unlike many of my fellow students and residents, I didn't have a laptop. Unfortunately, I was enrolled at a creative writing course where I had to make use of a computer and a printer almost daily. Thankfully enough, our apartment complex had a communal computer room very few of the residents used. Between that and the year-specific digital room at our college, I was pretty much well set. It was around a month into the semester when I started running into problems. I usually used a specific computer at both the digital room and the computer room back home. I chose ones which were as obscurely placed as possible, so there would be less traffic to them. Not that there was a lot of traffic in either of those areas. It was at the college computer that I first noticed it. Usually, no one bothered changing wallpapers on these college computers, and we all copied our stuff onto PDs and deleted them from the computer. But now, whenever I logged in, the wallpaper would have always changed. This in itself wouldn't be a cause for concern, but these were usually very suggestive or twisted pictures. For example, there was one of an anime girl tied up naked and bleeding. This is one of the milder ones. I checked the other nearby computers to find they were fine, and figuring some sicko was just using that particular computer, tried switching to others. But the same thing kept happening. I didn't pay much attention to it because they're communal, what you expect. Then, one day, when I logged into the computer back at the apartment complex, the wallpaper had changed to a real girl in some kind of BDSM situation, clearly out of a porno. I'd have dismissed this as well, except for the fact that each of the residents who use the computers have password-protected user accounts, and it shouldn't have been possible for someone to log into mine and change the wallpaper. Not to mention, you need a resident ID to get into that area. I thought maybe it was some prank by a friend, even though I was pretty sure I hadn't given my password to anyone. I changed the password and moved on, but no matter how many times I changed it, the wallpapers didn't stop changing. I tried to shift computers, but, like at the college, it didn't work. I was a little creeped out, but since I never did keep anything personal on either of the computers I used, and none of my other accounts or passwords showed signs of being tampered with, I put it down to some crazy prank by a crazy friend. It couldn't have been a general one because I talked to the residents and no one else had similar problems. Half a month or so after this began, I found a virtual sticky note on my college computer. It simply said, "Hi," smiley face. Well, it was probably just a student playing around. Thinking nothing of it, I ignored it and went about my work. The next day, there was one of a different colour. I don't remember all of them quite as well as the first short one, but it said something like, "Why didn't you reply?" I ignored it again. I'm a withdrawn person. I have very few friends, and I'm satisfied with that. I didn't want to start a random conversation over a computer, no matter how novel the idea was. The third note read, "It's rude of you to ignore me." I decided to shift computers once again, because this was becoming creepy, even though I knew that the notes weren't actually aimed at me. The next day, I found a note on my new computer, asking me if I was trying to avoid them. I kept getting these notes, no matter how much I changed stations, and after around 2 weeks of this bizarre occurrence, I stopped using the digital room altogether, preferring to stay up an hour later than usual and completing my work in the apartment computer room. It didn't take long for the notes to start popping up on the workstations there as well. Only now, they were creepier, telling me things like if I knew how innocent I looked when I slept, or how they wanted to tie me up and worse things that I don't want to say. I wanted to go to the police, but also didn't want to risk it if this was a friend playing pranks, so I asked all of my friends. None of them owned up to anything, even after I mentioned the cops. So I went ahead. The guy who listened to my case was sympathetic, but maintained that this was someone playing a horrible prank. Thankfully though, it stopped after that visit to the police station. After a month or so, it went out of my mind and I calmed down, thinking it had been a joke all along. Then, one night, I was down in the computer room working on an assignment till a little after midnight. As I walked towards the door, something caught my eye. On the computer, right next to the door, written in red, huge letters across a white background, were the words, "I think you'd look pretty in red. Good thing I have a razor right here." The communal facilities of our complex operated on the keycard system, and there was no attendant to lock up any of the communal rooms. We just swiped our resident ID cards while entering. On top of that, to get to my building, I needed to walk through a narrow, not very well lit back alley. I was effectively alone, and as that fact sank in, I sprinted out of the room and down the alley. I heard footsteps behind me, but it only motivated me to run faster. For a second, whoever was following me seemed to get closer as their steps got louder, but the sound faded away as I neared my building and a group of students who had been out late like me. My flatmate was in most of the same classes as me, and when I told her, she offered to go down to the computer room with me whenever I needed, despite not needing to herself. I also notified the apartment authorities, and bought a laptop, despite not really being fond of asking my parents for money, and not having the funds to buy one myself. This spawned a whole new set of problems. Almost every night, someone would toss pebbles at my bedroom windows and balcony. One night, I even heard knocking on the balcony door. The police in our area generally take an unsympathetic view of women's safety, and they told me clearly that they thought it was a harmless prank and could do nothing unless something actually happened. Sometimes, when I returned home late despite my best efforts, I'd see someone following me in the distance, just far enough that I couldn't see their face clearly, and usually dressed in clothes that concealed their identity as far as possible, like thick coats and hats or hoodies that obscured their face. I couldn't even tell if it was a male or female. If I sat at one desk in a class for some consecutive days, there would be threatening and or quasi-loving notes left there. When I went to the cops, they said once again that they couldn't do anything unless I identified someone as the culprit. For about a whole year, I lived in constant fear, dashing through dark, unpopulated areas and stretches of roads, and avoiding places where there were only a few people present. I took to carrying pepper spray around, and enrolled in a few self-defense classes. One morning in early March of last year, there was a simple sticky note on my apartment door, saying, "Sorry love, you'll have to wait a little longer." It was signed with a smiley face, and none of the other residents admitted to it. Later that day, I found an unaddressed beige envelope on my mail slot. Inside it were printouts of pictures, some of which I identified as having been the wallpapers I previously mentioned. All of them were nasty, but not as much as the other pictures, of me in class, the computer lab, my apartment, hanging out with my friends, walking in the streets, pretty much everywhere. With them was a note that said, "Thinking of you, always." Thankfully, that was the end of it, and nothing like that has ever happened again, though I live in fear of when he or she would come back. I've just gotten my master's degree this year, and have moved back home, 2 states away from my uni, and the creep whose face I'll never know. And I hope it stays that way.
Witness a man in his late 20s, all alone in a 2-story house on Halloween Eve. The trick-or-treaters have long since gone. Now, it's time for him to relax with a warm glass of milk and watch a horror film. As he sits in a comfortable chair in his basement in front of a large flat-screen TV, he feels a small sense of security from the outside world. But there is one thing at this moment that he must be aware of. Me. My name is not important. It certainly won't matter to my new friend. According to his ID that I've just found, his name's John. I'm currently hiding in John's bedroom upstairs. What am I doing in this particular house? Just having some fun, of course. Call me the dark figure, for I dress completely in black. I'm just an average guy you've probably seen on the bus heading to work in the big city. When I'm not busy at my 9-to-5 desk job or spending my time with my girlfriend, I'm sneaking into people's houses. Fun and games, you know. There's no rules for the games that I play. I just like to make them up as I go along, just to be creative, that's all. I choose my playmates based on one specific thing: unlock doors. You'd be surprised how many people don't even bother locking their doors anymore. I crept into so many houses where the residents were busy watching a movie. Just like this man, Josh. You've seen the look on their faces. Anyway, you'd think on a Halloween night that somebody wouldn't dare leave their front doors unlocked, what with all the crazies in costumes running wild. Luckily, John wasn't thoughtful enough to do that. Now I will have a happy Halloween. I've brought along a toy for this occasion, my trusty pry bar that I stole years ago from my dad's garage. It's long, blunt and sharp. It's also kind of a pain to carry round because it has a rusted, menacing look that freaks the shit out of people, which amuses me. Oh, I also have a small bottle of very toxic green chemical that I stole from a friend who is a major in chemistry. To be honest, I have no idea what it does, but I'll know soon. Before my game starts, I'll think to myself, maybe I should try some Halloween candy. I love Snickers, Reese's, they bring me back to my childhood. The sound of the movie downstairs is shaking the house, but then suddenly, it stops. Perhaps my boots on the floor made too much noise. I retreat back to the darkness of the bedroom. Sure enough, Josh is making his way up the staircase right now, but he can't notice me if I remain in the shadows. He doesn't see me. I'm standing in the hallway right now staring back at him. He has no idea. He's going outside with a flashlight to investigate the noises that I've been making. Perfect. Time to go to work. I wait till Josh is outside searching around, then I creep past the door and pry it open slightly and proceed to the dark basement, which is now illuminated by the TV screen. There is a black and white horror film he has on pause. The DVD says it's Maniac. How fitting. No time to waste. I spot the mug of warm milk on a stand next to his comfy recliner. I have put several drops of the chemical into the steaming liquid, then retreat into a spare downstairs bedroom at the end of the small hallway. Now, I wait and listen. Getting excited, I hear the sound of Josh returning to his home, closing the door, followed by the sound of him descending the staircase. He sits back into his chair and unpauses the movie. Sounds of maniacal laughter fill the room. All I can hear is the film's next dialogue with classical music playing. Just then, I hear the sounds of Josh's body thud to the ground, followed by a dragging noise. The chemical has made him too weak to stand. Perfect. He's now crawling in agony to the nearest bathroom to try and puke it up. Luckily for me, the nearest bathroom is right across the room that I'm in. He's now getting closer. Time to strike. I step out of the shadows and Josh is crawling on the floor. I raise my pry bar, then impale him right through the head. Blood squirts out and splashes on my black mask. I pull out my weapon from his skull, then take it to the bathroom to wash off the blood and brain matter. Should I have tortured him more? Oh well, there's always going to be another victim. I take a seat on Josh's recliner and watch the rest of the movie before calling it a night. and sneaking out the back door. I have to get up early tomorrow anyway for a meeting, but someday soon, the dark figure will return. Remember, if you hear a strange noise at your door late at night, just tell yourself it's a wind. That way, I can really play with you.
My name is Milos and I live in Serbia. Serbia is a small country where nothing really happens except hooligan fights and shootouts. I lived in a small village called Sabaka Kamencha, where landworking and farming is a primary thing for earning money and surviving. We don't use electrical heating or whatever you call it over there. We use fireplaces that require wood. When I was 15 years old, I was never scared of the dark, because I basically lived in a place where there were forests and a lot of trees. I was inside my house with my mum and dad, and my dad told me that I needed to get some more wood so that the fireplace would keep burning. For me, this was a normal thing, because I'd done it a lot of times before. It was 11 PM at night, and I went out to get some wood, and I could hear footsteps coming from the back of the building where I was getting wood. Since I always carry a flashlight just in case, I started looking for who it was, but I never knew what kind of terrifying things I would see. I started looking and going through the forest because I wasn't scared of the darkness or animals. I went further and further into the forest, but there was nothing there, so I thought maybe it was just some hunter coming back home with a fox. I started going back, and suddenly I heard a pig scream coming from maybe 50 meters away from me. I ran back home and told my dad what I heard. He said that there would never be a situation where a pig scream would be heard at 11 PM at night. He grabbed his gun and got some ammo, and went with me to see what happened. As soon as we got into the forest, we saw some candle lights that were shining on the ground. We went to see what was there, but we were shocked, creeped out, and scared by what we saw. We hid in a bush behind a tree, as we were witnessing a satanic ritual going on. We instantly understood why the pigs were screaming so much. They were slaughtered and their heads were chopped off. The bodies of the pigs smelt so bad even from where we were standing. The heads of the pigs were put in order in the centre of the pentagram. Me and my father were both in shock, and we didn't know if we should just stand there and watch or just run away. We decided to do the latter and start running back home and to call the police immediately. My dad said to slowly back off about 5 meters away and then start running slowly so they wouldn't hear us. But of course I stepped on a branch, just like in the horror movies, and tripped over. All of the people turned around immediately after I fell, and they started yelling in Serbian,
"Get them, quick."
My dad immediately grabbed me and we started running so hard and fast, like we were running a marathon. I was so scared and my head was pumping like crazy. Luckily we got home before they could catch us. We called the police right away and informed them of the situation. The police arrived and we went into the woods to show them where the satanic ritual was going on, but sadly we couldn't find anything. That was the scariest moment of my life, and I would never ever recommend anybody to go into the woods at night.
I liked Ben. I really did. I mean, he was a nice guy. We had some fun times together in college. Messing around the dorm, going to parties, all the dumb shit that college guys do. He was cool and all, but he was a little pretentious. Well, I guess the word he used was artistic. He thought he was real smart. Spent a lot of time trying to prove it to everyone. He had his own blog developed to film critiques. Not the big ones though. Just little indie productions, because nothing else was worth his time. When he got like that, he could be pretty insufferable. Perhaps the most annoying thing that he did was performance art. Now, I don't want to be the guy who says that all performance art is dumb. But yeah, no, all performance art is dumb. Oh look, you're on display painting a picture of Jesus from your own urine. How original and edgy. Maybe I'm a little jaded, but it always seemed so contrived to me. Unfortunately, Ben really loved it. He thought there was something beautiful in art that was physically living, and he devoted an embarrassing amount of time to it. Anyway, I hung out with Ben a few times after college, but we mostly just met up to do some heavy drinking, and maybe hit up a strip club or two. He considered that performance art as well, which was just fine with me. It gave me an excuse to waste some ones. Since we didn't hang out very often, I had a bad feeling when he contacted me about a month before last Halloween. He called me up about 7 in the morning on a Saturday, which is too early to even consider waking up in my opinion. I answered in a daze and he started running his mouth like crazy, as though afraid that if he didn't get it all out at once, he never would.
Mikey, hey, Mikey, listen buddy, I need your help, okay? Okay, I've got this idea for performance and it's gonna be killer, you know? So good. It's going down on Halloween, can you help me? Look, I'll even pay you, man. $50. So how about it?
Now, I've never cared much about Halloween one way or the other, and I'm a pretty easy guy. $50 to probably just sit there and run a fog machine or some bullshit? Sign me up. For the right price, I could even pretend that I wanted to be there. Besides, what else are friends for? A few days later, he gave me the details. To be honest, I was a little shocked when he sent the email. I know the performance art is intended to be edgy and can sometimes be a little dangerous, but this seemed downright negligent.
Mike, thanks for agreeing to do this for me. I've talked to a few other people, but they weren't really comfortable with it, for reasons you'll probably be able to figure out. Of course, I understand if you want to back out, but I think you're probably the most reliable person I know. It's really not that big of a deal, I'm sure you'll agree. As I'm sure you've noticed, vampires have become very prominent in the media as of late. I say vampires because they are beginning to deviate so wildly from the traditional myths that they resemble forest fairies more than anything else. Altruistic, sparkly, whiny. Give me a break. We need more Dracula. We need more Carmilla. We need more death, destruction, and blood. My performance will center on the theme of rebirthing the vampire. For the vampire to be reborn, he must first be buried. To turn people's attentions back to the myths of old, I will be doing just that. I will be burying the vampire. I have a group of viewers signed up already to participate in the performance, so you don't need to worry about that. I'm gonna plant a series of vampire-themed clues around town for them to follow. The clues should be pretty simple, and it will probably take no more than an hour to an hour and a half for them to find me. Here comes the somewhat controversial part. Especially for this performance to have any semblance of meaning, I need to be buried alive. Don't worry, it's perfectly safe. I have a buddy from back home who's building me a coffin with a hole in the top. I'll be fixing it with a pipe that will stick an inch or two above the ground. That way I won't run out of air. I'll also have a few necessities in the coffin in case something happens. Food, water, and a flashlight. Once they arrive at my grave, which will be completely vampirized, they will be provided with an array of shovels and will bring me back to life, a reincarnation of the true mythological history of vampires. Here's where you come in. I need you to bury me. In addition, I need you to be my safety net. If they can't find me, if something goes wrong, if I become sick, I need you to be the one to get me out or call the police, if necessary. I'll also need you to decorate my grave, make it really creepy. Don't worry, I'll send you some blueprints. I know this is a little stressful, and it may take some time for you to decide, but rest assured, this is a completely safe project. There's no danger of suffocation and the coffin is sturdy, so it's very unlikely that it will collapse. I really just need you there for support, and the actual hard work of burying me. What do you say? I'd even be willing to up your pay to $100 if that's what you need. Let me know. Rest in peace, Ben.
I stared at my screen for a few minutes, completely dumbfounded. Once I got through all the bullshit about art and vampires and rebirth, what it came down to was death. This guy actually wanted me to almost kill him. I mean, sure, it probably was safe, but my mind went over the plan slowly. What if I couldn't get him out on time? One shovel and a pit of dirt wouldn't be a fast job. Furthermore, what if something happened to me? Before making a decision, I sent him another email asking if he was really sure he was up for this. Of course he knew, he said. And then he said something that would always stick with me. Art must be a little dangerous, my friend, for it to be real. A month later, I found myself standing at the foot of a grave. It was 6 feet deep and perfectly rectangular. Sitting at the bottom was a tapered coffin covered with black lacquer, a white skull painted on top. In the eye of the skull was a hole just big enough for the PVC pipe. Stenciled underneath was a line from Dracula.
For the dead travel fast.
I stood there like an idiot, waiting for Ben to show up. In the end, I decided to go along with this stupid gig. Ben was a stubborn bastard, and if I didn't help him, someone else would. At least, that's the justification I gave myself. But the real reason was that, deep inside my heart, his words were still echoing. Art must be a little dangerous for it to be real. I'd end up doing a little more work than I had intended. For one, I had to place his stupid clues around the city. It wasn't hard work, but it took some time to get them all in the proper places. Luckily for Ben, they were pretty obvious clues. There was no need to worry that his participants would be unable to find him. Ben had set up the grave and the coffin a few days prior to Halloween. It was out in the woods, just on the outskirts of town. No chance of it being disturbed. I had tried to talk him out of burying it the whole 6 feet down. If something happens and I need to get you out fast, what will I do? Can't you put it closer to the surface? Ben had just shaken his head in exasperation. You just don't get it, do you? It has to be done right. Remember what I told you. Art must be a little dangerous for it to be real. So I shrugged and let him mess around with whatever dumbassery would get him off. I was just beginning to wonder if I should have brought more beer. This promised to be a long night. When Ben showed up, I had to restrain my laughter when I saw his getup. A cheap Dracula costume from Walmart had never looked so pathetic, especially when topped off with those cheap plastic fangs. He'd greased his hair back and painted on a widow's peak. I couldn't resist. Wow, seriously, dude? He gave me a stern look. It's a comment on the commercialization of vampires and horror as we know it today. He fished around in his pocket and pulled out a walkie-talkie. Here, take one. The range isn't very far, but my cell phone won't work that far underground. You'll have to stay nearby. Let me know if you're going out of range. I shrugged and took it. Okay, but you brought your cell just in case, right? Nah, what good will it do if it doesn't work? This guy's batshit insane, I thought. But he handed me $100 and suddenly, it didn't seem to matter anymore. I helped him into the coffin and shut the lid. He seemed pretty calm. If it were me, I knew I'd be having a panic attack. I fit the PVC pipe into the hole. It slid in perfectly snug. I climbed out of the coffin and grabbed my shovel, taking one last look at the shiny black peeking out from the dirt. With a resigned shrug, I started to shovel in the dirt. Okay, well, he asked for this, I thought. It took almost a full hour to get all the dirt piled in. The PVC pipe was just barely visible over the grave. I piled the earth around it to hide it as well as I could. Then, I set up the rest of the grave. A hideously gothic headstone made of styrofoam and cheap Walmart flowers. Once it was finally finished, I sat back against a tree and waited. There was an awful lot of waiting to be done. 3 hours later, its participants still hadn't come. He'd buzzed in on the walkie-talkie a few times, asking if they'd shown up. I continually answered in the negative, wondering how long he'd be willing to keep up this charade. He must be getting worried, I thought, staring at my watch. It was already 10 p.m. and not a soul to be seen.
Hey, Mike? Something must have happened. I don't think they're coming. Can you get me out of here?
Ben's voice crackled and faded in and out of the static fuzz. I took another swig of my beer and heaved a sigh. Of course they weren't coming. They were frantically searching for the last clue. My hand crept into my pocket as I felt it folded there, the creases poking at the soft flesh on my palm.
Mike, are you there? Did you go out of range?
I turned the walkie-talkie off. I didn't need it anymore anyway. Carefully, I picked up a handful of disturbed earth from the top of the makeshift grave. I poured it down the pipe and listened. I heard the muffled exclamation, the series of expletives. I thought I could hear a thumping sound. He must be hitting the top of the coffin. I smiled a little to myself as I poured some more dirt in through the pipe. Ben's struggles got louder, and I felt a certain heat rising up in me. Oh, I knew it could be good, but I didn't know it could be this good. This was incredible. This was perfect. This was godly. Eventually, I grew bored of shoving the dirt down into the coffin. I could hear Ben screaming and sobbing reverberating up the pipe. I yanked a handkerchief out of my back pocket and stuffed it inside. I made sure to plug it up good and tight. It would only be a matter of time now. Assuming he could regulate his breathing, he could possibly have a few hours. But I knew he was panicking, and that would simply serve to shorten his time. The pounding grew weaker as I finished my beer. Once I was certain there was no saving him, I went to finish my work. Ben was right. Everything really did go off without a hitch. I don't know what I was so worried about. I'd gone to find his lost sheep, the wayward participants who were scrambling in frustration for the last clue. I scolded them for making us wait so long, acted the part of a reluctant friend indulging his lunatic companion. I took them out to the grave. It was now past midnight. They sat hushed as I gave the stupid speech that Ben had prepared for me. Everything seemed normal. I'd made sure to stow the rag before anyone could see it.
Friends, foes, and everyone in between. Tonight we gather to resurrect the ancient horror that has plagued mankind for centuries. Its tale, once a gruesome epic of blood and seduction, has become nothing more than commercialized fodder as society has aged. Now, the time has come for the phoenix to burn and rise again. So, too, shall the blood-soaked visage of the vampire.
My voice resonated throughout the woods, and the morons in attendance clapped as they all reached for their shovels. We dug him up in about half an hour. It was much faster work with this host of suckers. It was good that we reached the coffin quickly, because I could barely contain my excitement. Two of the men opened the coffin and screamed. The women leaned in over the grave to peek as well, full of expectancy. There was something dreadful about the scene, to be sure. Ben's face had gone gray, sprayed over with a few specks of dirt. His hands were bloody, his fingernails pried off. Deep scratches decorated the top of the lid. The men who had opened his tomb dragged him out in a panic, unsure if this was part of the performance or not. A few moments of silent listening at his chest produced no heartbeat. The proclamation was definitive. He was dead. They screamed. They called the police. They alternatively looked at his body and shielded themselves from its horror, enraptured yet struggling. They ignored me, but that was fine. It was fine because they were admiring my work, the work of the real artist. Finally, I had been given this opportunity to prove my worth. Finally, I had found my sacrificial lamb. And it had been a rousing success. The heat raging in my body affirmed that much. I didn't even care if I was caught, so long as I could have this moment to hold for the rest of my life. Ben was right. I should have known. A man of principle never lies, and I owe him a debt of gratitude for realizing the artist within me.
Art must be a little dangerous for it to be real.
Hi guys, thank you ever so much for watching tonight. Hope you all enjoyed the video. If you did, please feel free to leave a like, a share, a comment, or subscribe to the channel. I will be back later on in the week with some regular stories, we'll say. If you want to send in a creepypasta or a true life story or experience you've had, please feel free to send it to me using the email in the description box below. Also, check out tonight's narrators. They are all fantastic, and again, I just want to say thank you to everybody. So until next time, sleep tight.